Shalom everyone, Shavua Tov. Be'ezrat Hashem, we're starting today in Masechet Megilla and Yud Amud Aleph from the words Mikan ve'elech asur lesaper b'shvacho shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you look, it's let's say about 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 lines above the wide lines. That's what I have. Yud Amud Aleph. 4 lines above the wide lines where it says Mikan ve'elech asur lesaper b'shvacho shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What we had just finished off was the sugya that told us why Chazal organized the brachot of the Amidah in the way that they did. We went through each of them based on psukim and logic, etc. So the Gemara picks up here, and really this will be a conclusion of what we were saying last week, which was that further, you're not allowed to discuss really the praises of Hashem. We're not allowed to add on our own brachot to the Shemona Esrei, essentially. And then the next section we're going to discuss gets into the languages, actually, reading the Megillah Baal Peh, languages of the Megillah, which really refers back to the halachot of the Mishnah. So the Gemara says like this, Mekan ve'elech asur lesaper b'shvacho shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Beyond this, we're not allowed to speak the praises of Hashem. This sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but the idea is like this. Chazal arranged the brachot of the Amidah in a certain logical way. Once it's already established that way, we're not allowed to add on more praises of Hashem. What's the reasoning in that? Because we could never properly say all the praises of Hashem. So by definition, if we add on more praises, we're going to leave something out. Meaning by definition, we're going to shortchange Hashem because we can't say all of His praises. So whatever Chazal said we say. But beyond that, we don't speak the praises of Hashem. The Amar Rabbi Elazar, like Rabbi Elazar said in Tehillim, we know it says, Mi yamalel gvurot Hashem, who can say the greatness of Hashem? Hashmiya kol tehilato, he who can make heard all of His praises. What does that mean? Lemina el yamalel gvurat Hashem, who could say over the might of Hashem? Lemi sheyachol lashmiya kol tehilato. Anyone that could say all of the praises of Hashem. Now, obviously, no one could say all the praises of Hashem. So the idea is that we're not allowed to say part of it because we can't say all of it, and that's a bizayon. It's very interesting. Someone speaks about the praises of Hashem more than is required, more than sufficient. He's uprooted from this world. Like the pasuk says, in Iyov, it says, "Hayesupar lo." Can you speak about him? Ki adaber, that I am talking. Imamar ish, and if someone does do this, he starts speaking about the praises of Hashem too much. Ki bala, he will be absorbed, means he'll be destroyed. I believe it's brought down. This is an issue within the context of tefillah, meaning in tefillah to start adding your praises of Hashem is a problem. Something good happens to you, and you say Baruch Hashem, you say nice things, I don't think that's necessarily an issue. But in the context of tefillah, was ordained already, that's already what's established. I believe that's where it's brought down. What does it mean in Tehillim when it says, Lecha dumya tehillah? It says, for you, silence is praise. What does that mean? It means, Sama dekula mashtuka. The solution, the medicine for everything is silence. There is so much damage that we do simply because we don't keep our mouths shut. The solution for everything, the medicine for just to be quiet. If you don't have something smart to say, don't say anything. It's a basic. Silence is a tremendous thing. And Rav Dimi came, they said in Israel, Mila bisela, that if you would pay 1 sela, 1 coin for a word, mashtuka betrain. So a moment of silence costs 2. Meaning it's the same idea, which is the value of silence is immeasurable. It's a tremendous thing. Obviously, there's times we need to talk, but also sometimes we talk too much and we create problems because of that. Okay, let's continue. We said in the Mishnah, if you read Megillah by heart, not from the scroll, you're not yotze. Minalan, how do we know this? How do we know if you read it not out of the scroll, you're not yotze? Amarava atya zechira zechira. We have a gzera shava. Zechira, zechira. What does it mean? It says regarding the Megillah, V'ayamim ha'eled nizkarim. It says these days will be remembered. Now, what does it mean? That's referring to reading the Megillah. And it says the end of Bishalach, when it talks about remembering Amalek, what they did, it says Ketov zot zikaron besefer. It says write this remembrance in the Sefer. Mala'alan basefer, just as there it says basefer, that by Zechirat Amalek, remembering to erase Amalek, you have to read it out of a Sefer. It says clearly in the Torah. So Zechira, like Zerah Shava tells us, also regarding reading the Megillah, it has to be read out of a Afkan basefer, out of a book. Asks the Gemara, Mimai dahai Zechira kriyahi. How do you know by Amalek it means reading it out of the book? Dilma iyun ba'alma. Maybe it just means analyzing it. Meaning maybe you need to use a sefer, yeah, but you just study it. How do you know actually you have to read it? You have to verbalize. So the Gemara answers, Lo salkadatach. Don't think that, because it says, the end of Kitetzeh, when it talks about Amalek, it says zechor. It says remember. Yachol balev, you might think that it only means remember it in your heart, but it does not have to be verbalized. Kishu omer lo tishkach. When it says don't forget, that's referring to just remembering it in your heart. So why does it emphasize also by Amalek, remember it? That teaches you that it actually has to be verbalized with your mouth. And since it says basefer, it means out of a book. And through the Gzerah Shavah, we know with Megillah, it's the same thing. Okay, Karat Targum lo yatsa. We said in the Mishnah, if he reads the Megillah in Targum, Targum is Aramaic, a different language, lo yatsa, you're not yotzei the mitzvah. So the Gemara says, Echidami, what is the case of Targum? Reading it in the Aramaic. Ilema dechtiva mikra. If it's written in the Megillah in Hebrew, the Karila Targum, and he read it in Aramaic. This is not an easy thing, by the way. It means somebody pulls out a regular Megillah, and as he's reading it, he's translating it. Mm-hmm. So instead of saying Vahi b'me'ach Hashverosh, he says in Aramaic, whatever that is. If that's the pshat in the Mishnah, Lo Yatsa, so Hainu al Peh, there's no chidush in saying you're not yotzeh because that's by heart. The idea of reading it from the scroll means reading what the scroll says. Mm-hmm. You're not reading what the scroll says, you're translating it. So that's obviously you're not yotzeh, that's bal Peh. So lo tzricha dechtiva targum mikari la targum. No, what the Mishnah must be saying is you're not yotzeh when it's written in Aramaic. It means you have a translated scroll and you're reading it in Aramaic. The chidush is you're not yotzeh. Now this would imply that if it's written in a foreign language, you can't read that language to be yotzeh. Okay, so let's keep that in mind for a minute. So the Mishnah then right afterwards says something seemingly contradictory. It says you could read it to foreign language speaking people in their language. Now what does that imply? That you could read it out of a different language scroll. So it's almost a contradiction, one sentence to the other. So asks the Gemara, but you just said if you read it in another language, you're not yotzeh. Mm-hmm. So which one is it? So Rav and Shmuel, the Amri Tarvayu, Rav and Shmuel both answer. And this will be refuted. But Rav and Shmuel say, Bila'az Yevani. The Mishnah, when it says, reading it in a foreign language is acceptable to those people, is referring to La'az Yevani. It refers to Greek. Now, it's very unclear why Greek is unique in this way. But at this point, we're going to say, Rav and Shmuel seem to hold Greek is more significant than other languages. Mm-hmm. That if it's written in Greek, you read it in Greek, the people who hear it are yotzei, and it also would appear that anyone's yotzei. Sounds very much like the position of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel we had earlier. We'll get to that momentarily, but that's the pshat in the Mishnah. So Gemara says again, what's the case? If it's written in Hebrew and he's reading it in Greek, that's bal peh, you're not yotzei. Again, it's written in Greek and he's reading it in Greek, and people are yotzei if they hear that. Now, what the Gemara is about to do now is say something that's completely unrelated to this discussion. It's just said by the same person. And then we'll get back after this next point and challenge what Rav and Shmuel just said is the pshat in the Mishnah. So if Amar B'ach, Amar B'Lazar, this is unrelated. Minayin shekar'o HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yaakov Kel. How do we know that Hashem called Yaakov Kel? Now the word Kel, or El in the context, it really signifies power. It's a name of Hashem, but it also symbolizes power. So we find in the Psukim that Hashem called Yaakov Avinu this word Kel. That's what we find. Shene'emar, like it says in Vayishlach, it says Vayikra Lo Kel. He called him Kel, Elokei Yisrael, the God of Israel. Now, the way we're going to translate it is like this. Hashem called Yaakov Kel. Who was it that called Yaakov Kel? Elokei Yisrael, the God of Israel. Because otherwise, the way you could learn the pasuk is that Yaakov called the Mizbeach that he set up Kel. Now he referenced the Mizbeach as something for Kel. Vayikra lo Yaakov mibayle. The problem is, then it should have said Vayikra lo Yaakov. Yaakov called it. Ela Vayikra lo Yaakov. Rather, the pshat in the pasuk is he called Yaakov Kel. Umikar o Kel Elokei Israel. The God of Israel called Yaakov Kel. Now, what's the implication of this? I don't know if you look at the Mefarshim exactly, but the point is, Hashem called Yaakov Kel. I don't exactly know why. We don't believe in dual powers. Obviously, it doesn't mean Yaakov Avinu was a god. That's obviously not the pshat. So you have to know exactly what the pshat in that is.
And why is it mentioned here?
Well, the reason it's mentioned here is because it's the same Amora that quoted the last pshat. Rav Acha Amar Belazar says the same. He was the answer before, and he just said this memra. It interjects between the conversation, which is a little bit difficult. But back to our story at hand here. We said that Rav and Shmuel are both explaining that the Mishnah, when it mentions that you can read to foreign-speaking people in their language, it means in Greek. They said that's the pshat in the Mishnah. So the problem is, Meitive, we have a Braita that contradicts that, because the Braita says clearly, Kar'a giftit, if you read it in any of these languages, these are different languages. I'm not sure if they all exist today anymore. I believe giftit is Coptic, it's translated. I don't know what that is. Ivrit, now Ivrit does not mean Hebrew here, it's a different language. Ilmit, Madit, and Yevanit, it says also in Greek, Lo Yatsa. So the Braita says you're not Yotze when you read the Megillah in Greek. So l'chaora, it sounds like Rav and Shmuel are incorrect in their explanation of the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, Halo Damya, if anything, you want to explain our Mishnah, you could compare it El Laha. When it says you could read it to Lo Azot, it means Giftit le Giftim, Ivrit le Ivrim, Ilmit le Ilmim, Yevanit le Yevanim, Yatsa. Meaning, any foreign-speaking person, you could read it to them in their language. Now, just to be clear, Hebrew you could read to anyone, whether they understand or not. But the way we'll understand the Mishnah when it says Lo Azot Belaz means if it's a foreign-speaking person, and the Megillah is written in that language, you could read it to them in their language, but that's not like Rav and Shmuel. It means we're saying now any foreign language is sufficient if you're reading it to people who understand that language. So the Gemara says, if so, why are Rav and Shmuel specifically saying our Mishnah is talking about Greek? It could be any language. The way we just said is our Mishnah could be understood as in any language. So the Gemara says, you're right. Our Mishnah that says you could read it in any other language, it means, like the Braita says, you read it to foreign-speaking people in their language. That's acceptable, no problem. That's how we'll explain the Mishnah. And when it said the first sentence of the Mishnah, only in Hebrew, it means if they don't understand French, you can't read them the Megillah in French. That's the pshat. But if they do, you could read them the Megillah in French. That's the pshat in the Mishnah.
Even if they understand Hebrew?
Even if they don't understand Hebrew. If a person does not
understand Hebrew and understand French, in they read in French, but they understand Hebrew, so the priority should be Hebrew, right?
L'chora, l'chora.
Okay, and they read it in French only if they don't understand Hebrew, so they have a way to understand the
Perhaps. I want to be clear. Rav and Shmuel are going to say a chidush in a minute, but I don't know if we paskin this way. I'll tell you why I'm not sure we paskin this way is because I'm not sure that the languages we're mentioning here, we know exactly what these languages are. Yeah. Meaning today, a lot of the original 70 languages, I don't even know if we know any of the original 70 languages in their pure form. Mm. So I'm not sure actually we can utilize this leniency altogether. That's what I'm not, meaning today, you say I could read it in English and then the tzibur will all understand. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure you're allowed to do that necessarily. It's not so simple, right? Okay. So the Gemara turns back to Rav and Shmuel and says, Yihachi Rav and Shmuel, amay mok milah lematniti belaz yevanit, look ma b'cholas. Elamatnitin kibraita. Fine. So what's the pshat in Rav and Shmuel? V'chi itmar de Rav and Shmuel ba'alma itmar. Rav and Shmuel were not commenting on our Mishnah, but they were actually explaining their own shita elsewhere, which is Rav and Shmuel da'amir tarvayu la'az yevani la'kol kasher. Rav and Shmuel held that Greek is permissible for everyone. That's the chidush of Rav and Shmuel. Like Hebrew, exactly like Hebrew. That's the chidush.
If you don't understand Greek, you're still Yotze.
You're still Yotze, which is a major chidush. We have to say why, so we'll see. Ayvakatani yevanit le'yevanim. But we said in the Braita, it's only Greek to people who understand Greek. So how could you say that? Le'yevanim in lekuli amalo, but that implies not for other people. So the Gemara answers, Inhu da'amar k'Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav and Shmuel follow the Tana, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the Tanan, which we brought earlier on Chet Amud Bet. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Af Sfarim lo hitiru sheyichdevu eli Yavanit. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, Sfarim cannot be written b'chol lashon in any language, but they could be written in Greek other than Hebrew. That's allowed. So the Gemara says that's the Chidush of Rav and Shmuel. The Chidush is, they hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, that other Sfarim, including the Megillah, could be written and read also in Greek. It's equivalent to Hebrew. We brought sources there, on Chet Tet over there, that explained to us why Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel held this language was different. Asks the Gemara, okay, beautiful. But then it comes out that it's a machloket, meaning the Rabbanan hold you can't read it in Greek if they don't understand. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds Greek is unique and you could read it even if they don't understand. And Rav and Shmuel paskin like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. But then why didn't Rav and Shmuel just say the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel? When they say you could read it in Greek even if they don't understand, it sounds like they're paskening their own halacha. They're not. They're paskening like a previous Tana. So why didn't they say the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel? The Gemara answers, because if they said that halachas like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, I would have said Hani mili shar Sfarim. I'd say maybe the halachas like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel by other Sfarim, the rest of Nach, of Nevim, Tuvim, etc. Tanakh. Aval Megillah, but regarding the Megillah, Dichtiv Ba, we know the pasuk says Kichtavam. It says in their writing. So you may have thought regarding the Megillah, Malo, maybe you can't apply the same leniency of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and write it and read it in Greek. Kamash Malan, therefore Rav and Shmuel come to add the Chidush, which is, even regarding the Megillah, where you would have thought otherwise, it could also be written and read in Greek. So they are following Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and they're extending his ruling to Megillah. It can be read and written and read also in Greek. Tachlis, I don't know, it's an interesting shaila, which is, could you do this today? Because it comes out according to the Rabbanan, seemingly, as long as you understand that language, you can write it and read it, and you're Yotzei. I don't know, interesting. I would want to look this up if you're Yotzei actually. I would be doubtful, kind of. I'll tell you, I saw brought down. The Rambam actually comments on Rav and Shmuel, because Rav and Shmuel is an even greater Chidush. Rav and Shmuel are coming out that if it's in Greek, even if you don't understand Greek, you're still Yotzei like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. So I saw the Rambam comments on this. It's funny. Remember that day AB was here? It's like we came one time.
Yeah. So
he was bothering me after. He said, I understand. I thought the Torah has to be written only in Hebrew. Where does that? So I looked it up, and it was a good question. The Rambam says this is only. It's not halakha l'maaseh anyways. Why? Because whatever was Laz Yavanit, Greek, whatever it was, we don't have that anymore. Whatever is Greek today wasn't Greek of 2,000 years ago. So therefore, anyways, even if you follow Rav and Shmuel, you still wouldn't have a leniency to write it and read it in Greek, because we don't have that language. It's been corrupted by different dialects and different languages, etc. So I would imagine with the Rabbanan also, it's possible. I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe it's the original 70. I don't know. I would want to look that up. I'm not sure. Right. There were 70 languages initially. I don't know if we have any of those in their pure form today.
No, right. French would be Latin.
Right.
Something like that.
These are all developments and progressions of something. So.
Yeah.
For sure English. English Bechlal is a corrupted language. So, all right. Continues the Gemara. We said in the Mishnah, a person who is a foreign-speaking person, he does not understand Hebrew, but Hebrew is unique. Ashurit is unique, and everyone's Yotzei. He says the Gemara, but he does not know what's being said. So how is he Yotzei if he doesn't know what's going on? So the Gemara answers, back in the day, the women were not very educated. That's just the reality. They didn't have the Beit Yaakov movement yet, and they didn't. So the women didn't understand Megillah, but they listened to it, and they're Yotzei. Also the Amei Haaretz, the less knowledgeable men also. They're still Yotzei, by the way. That's why they used to translate it into Targum in Shul. It used to be, the Teimanim still do this. Why do they translate it into Aramaic? Because Aramaic was the common language. So when they read Kriyat Torah, they had the Baal Koreh, and they also had Metorgaman, who translated it into Aramaic so that Hamon Am could understand the Torah. That was done with Kriyat Torah because of the mitzvot. Chazal want the people to know the mitzvot, because people didn't necessarily know Hebrew. We have far more access to education today than they did back in the day.
Right.
So people weren't so educated.
I'm wondering why it doesn't mention Aramaic.
What do you mean?
Like should have said also Aramaic can be the Megillah can be read in Aramaic.
Why Aramaic? Well, you need a source for that.
No, because it's mentioning the Greek, which was the language at that time. Also Aramaic was the language at that time.
Are you saying any of those languages?
Yes.
Yeah, it could be also.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I hear you.
I
hear. I hear. No, Lachar would be the same. I hear.
Yeah.
I think you're right. So the point is, right, so just like their Yotzei, even though they don't understand, so also if you hear and you a foreign speaking person is also Yotzei if he hears Megillah. So Gemara says Matkif la Ravina, he challenged Bechlal the premise. He says it's not even a question because Etu Anan ha'achashtaranin b'nei haramachin miyad inan. There's words in the Megillah that even we don't know necessarily what it means. It's interesting, I saw somebody brought down, this refers to quick camels, that they used to go very quickly. But in Megillat Esther, there's certain words that we don't even know necessarily what the pshat is. So, what's the pshat? Ela mitzvat kriya u'persume nisa. The mitzvah of Megillah is to read it, and it spreads the miracle. It's when we read the Megillah, so afterwards everybody talks about it, and that spreads the nature of the miracle. That's called persume nisa. It's not only for Chanukah, it's also for Purim. So Chanami mitzvat kriya persume nisa. So it's the same thing. Even if you don't understand the entirety of the Megillah because you speak a different language, you don't understand Hebrew, as long as they discuss the Megillah after, which naturally happens on Purim, that's just the reality. You discuss the miracle. It's an important thing happens to be we should focus on. Discussing the miracle that happened, discuss with our families, with our friends, etc. So you're Yotzei, that's the idea of Megillat Esther. Mm-hmm. Okay, now we said in the Mishnah, Kar'as Serugin Yatsa. We said if you read it Serugin, you're Yotzei. Now, Serugin means incrementally. It means you read a little bit, you stop. You read a little bit more, you stop. A little more, you stop. So the Gemara says, the Gemara tells us now a series of stories where the students of the yeshiva didn't know what a certain word meant. Now this is very interesting, but the maidservant in Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's house was very educated. So when they didn't know what a word meant, they would consult with her or listen to her conversations, and often they were given insight into what Mishnayot will see what certain words meant. You know, I guess you could see, like in the house of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, his maidservant, was something special. So, Lo avayadi Rabbanan mai serugin. They didn't know what was serugin. So Sham'u alamata debe Rebbe, they heard the maidservant of Rebbe's house, Deka amra lehula Rabbanan, that she was saying to the rabbis, to have a aili piski lebe Rebbe. They were coming in groups to Rebbe's house, meaning 3 of them would come and then another 3 would come a few minutes later, incrementally. That's what they were doing. So she said to them, Ad matay atem nichnasim serugin. It sounds like they were giving musar. She was giving musar. She was saying, until when are you going to come in serugin? Is like in these little groups. I mean, get in already, I guess. That's what she was saying. But they took from this, you see the word serugin means incrementally, starting and stopping and starting and stopping. Lo avu yadi Rabbanan. Now on this note, the Gemara goes on to a couple more similar stories. Lo avu yadi Rabbanan, my chalug lugot. They didn't know what this chalug lugot was. Chalug lugot is purslane. It's a type of plant or a vegetable. Sham'u la'amata debe Rebbe, they heard the maidservant of Rebbe, da amr le'lahu gavra, da hava kamevader parpechine, that she said to a certain person who was scattering this vegetable, purslane, ad matay ata mefazer chalug logecha, until when are you going to scatter your chalug logot? So they said, okay, that's the pshat in regards to what it means. Rashi says, it's quoted in Mishnayot in different places. I guess they learned the Mishnah in the Braitaot, and they said, what is this thing? And they heard her talking about it, they understood. They didn't know what it meant when it says in Mishlei, it says silsila, which literally means turn it over and it will elevate you. It's referring to the Torah, is that when we engage in the Torah and turn it over and analyze it, it elevates us. So they didn't know what the pshat was in this pasuk. So that there was a person who was turning over his hair. And he was playing with his hair. So she said, you're not allowed to play with your hair so much, you're a man. So Amrle, she said to him, Ad matai ata misalsel b'sa'arecha, until when are you going to play with your hair? Turn over your hair. So they understood that it means, when it comes to the Torah also, turning it over, analyzing it, plumbing its depths. The rabbis didn't know in Tehillim when it says, Hashlech al Hashem yahavecha, throw on Hashem your burden. They didn't know what that meant. So Amar Rabbi Bar Barchana, zimna chada hava zilna, it's very interesting. So Rabbi Barchana, he said, one time I was walking behind a certain Arab, v'kadarina tuna, and I was holding a bundle, a burden, Va'amarli, and this Arab said to me, Shkol Yahavech v'shadi agam aloi. He said, take Yahavech, take your burden, which is the pshat in the pasuk that he derived from it, and throw it on my camel. I guess the Arabs had respect. So he said, take your burden to the rabbi and throw it on my camel. The point is, you see, Yahavech means a burden. Final story, Lo Aviyadi Rabbanan Mai V'Ta'atetia B'Ma'atata Hashmed. They didn't know what it means in Yeshaya when it says, I will sweep them with a broom of destruction. So Shamua La'amata Devei Rebbe Dahavat Amr Lechaverta. They heard the maidservant of Rebbe who said to her friend, it seems like another woman, Shekule Ta'atita V'Ta'ati Beita. Take the broom and sweep the house. So they understood then, the pshat in the pasuk is, Hashem was saying He'll destroy with a broom of destruction. We're going to stop here, the bottom of Yidchet Amud Aleph, and we'll pick up tomorrow with Yidchet Amud Bet, Bezat Hashem. Yom Tov, Shabbat Tov.